Tell us about yourself. Tell us about your history.
Johan, I mean, I was brought up in Johannesburg from a relatively well-off home. I went to an all-boys school, went to a traditional boys' school.
And you started drugs in school?
I started drugs at school. My first encounter with minor mood-altering drugs was around about the age of 12.
Really?
Pretty much typical sinners at school.
Oh, typical sinners?
Just typical sinners at school. Yeah, also like fire extinguishers called BCF, which I don't think exists these days, which is particular fire extinguishers, yeah, that was used to put out chemical fires, had a little red green tag on it.
So what did you do?
Yeah, it's like an inhalant type of thing. Yeah, so that's kind of where I started. Started escalating, smoking cigarettes in school. That's when the marijuana started to come into play.
How old were you at what stage?
It was about 15, 16, around about there. During this period, obviously, failed standard 6, failed standard 9, and ended up getting expelled from school at the end of standard 9. Pretty much excused from home at the age of 17, where my life in addiction began, because that was pretty much a choice that it was a path that I chose.
And then Hillbrow?
Inevitably, that's where it ended up. It ended up with a pair of jeans and a vest to my name, living in Berea and Hillbrow for a couple of years. Until my folks were contacted at that point in time. They were living in Argentina and Buenos Aires. Got a call from one of the guys, funny enough, that I was actually using with, who had said to them that I'd gone over the edge, who inevitably hired 2 private detectives to come for a bit of a word hot extract me out of Hillbrow. And then from that point kind of started my kind of rehabilitation and treatment journey.
What were you using then?
I used the list. It literally took me about 17, 18 years to go from zero to hero. When I say zero to hero, I'm talking about from typical sinners right up to my demise, which was to heroin, crack addiction. So yeah, that eventually the heroin brought me to my knees, and I went into treatment at the age of 26.
At age 26?
At age 26, yeah.
And how long did it take?
Yeah, I think it's important to know so that up until that point, I hadn't earned an honest rand in my life. I certainly was not marketable. I certainly had kind of limited education, which was going to propose itself to be a problem during treatment. Because I think a lot of treatment centres, after you finished a primary care facility, would encourage you to go into a secondary care or a post-care treatment, where they pretty much say you have to be out at 5, 6 o'clock and go job hunting, and then be back at 5, which was clearly not going to work for me. It was going to be an ideal situation to set me up for using again. I think that's when South Coast Recovery Centre became an option for me many, many, many years ago. So yeah.
Is this where you came to dry out or whatever?
Well, I did the third time. So, I did a couple. The first I started off was in a clinic in Cape Town. I moved to a second inpatient long-term facility in Cape Town under the auspices of the same management. Being told that I'm a harder of harder cases, that there's no ways that I was going to stop the drugs, that my parents were convinced that they should rather invest money into a funeral policy. The only way I was going to ever stop the drugs, even the drugs stopped me. Long-term experience was pretty much lying through my teeth still. Really had more kind of less the drugs. There'd be no kind of cognitive and behavioural changes and shifts that have taken place. And when I opted to willingly stay for the 4th month, things started happening for me. And that's pretty much when it was laid on my heart that this is possibly something I should kind of entertain as doing a ministry. Something that, bearing in mind at that point in time, not seeing how I was ever going to achieve that. And, my life was pretty much a dismal failure up to that point. Any kind of education or tertiary education I started, I never completed, which is typical addiction style, which is probably something else that one needs to take into consideration relative to juniors, when the Substance Abuse Act happens.
And how long have you been clean now?
Celebrating 13 years in March.
Good. And you are now managing the centre?
Yeah, I'm the operations director of the centre. I'm one of the senior psychotherapists here at South Coast Recovery Centre. Managed along the way, which I'm an ideal learning opportunity where, coming from the University of Hard Knocks, as I call it, into a situation of where I was able to, educate myself with the necessary undergraduate degrees and apply that practically into the working environment. Which I've managed to achieve, as well as being registered with the Federation of Drug and Alcohol Professionals, as well as the nationally accredited addiction specialist. So
Tell us about the centre. How do you guys operate? Give us a commercial.
Sure. So I think, it'll probably take a day and a night to explain. This property over here has been specifically purchased, particularly for the purpose of drug and alcohol treatment. Now running almost 13 years. I think it was opened on the 1st of February 2000. I stand under correction there, which pretty much started in the director of South Coast Recovery Centre's house. I was the 6th resident at South Coast Recovery Centre, and I think we've privileged enough to have about 1,400 and something odd people come through our doors in that 12-year period. We're very, very, very strong believers in inpatient treatment. We have seen, and in our experience, that short-term treatment offers very, very, very limited success. For an individual to come into treatment and be able to mask and do the show and kind of busk it for a 4-week period and just comply and go through the motions is a very easy thing to do. But
So how long do they have to? What is the average time?
The average time frame is around about 6 months. Depending on the severity, depth, and the duration of the addiction and the drug of choice. I mean, if you take heroin treatment, for example, we've also found this with marijuana, which is seen as a pretty social, innocent drug these days. Probably from a treatment perspective, I want to say that it is probably the most dangerous drug available.
Marijuana?
From a treatment perspective, so very much so. Because of the availability of it, because of the deep entrenched denial base that it comes with it, as well as the drug psychosis, the cases of drug psychosis that we've experienced, which is a very, very, very scary thing. Just to give you an idea of what psychosis is, when a person goes into psychosis, goes psychotic, it's basically the individual is removed from reality. So the deeper they go into fantasy, the further they are removed from reality. Obviously, the thinking is not linear. And we're starting to see a lot of kind of coexisting or dual diagnosis attached to marijuana abuse. Psychosis is just one of them. We're seeing a lot of kind of marijuana or drug-induced schizophrenia coming through. And we're seeing a lot of kind of dual diagnosis, panic disorders and various things that have been certainly triggered off by marijuana addiction. So very, very, very scary.
Schizophrenia, I know many cases are hereditary, but can marijuana bring on schizophrenia?
Very much so, sir. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, you do get, drug-induced schizophrenia, particularly in the cases, I would say, I think the substances that are most responsible for that is marijuana, alcohol and crystal meth, which is starting to rapidly accelerate as well. That's stuck, yeah. It's a very, very, very scary thing. For the individual that's suffering with schizophrenia, they have what you call negative symptoms and positive symptoms. The negative symptoms are pretty much the kind of deterioration in hygiene, the lack of care, the lack of looking after oneself, the complete breakdown, a loss of routine and structure. And then, of course, the positive symptoms is when individuals are experiencing such things as what we call auditory or visual hallucinations. Which is a very, very scary thing. They often think that other people can read their thoughts. They have something called an internal dialogue, which is usually persecutory in nature. So as an individual engages with them, they really think that you're persecuting them. They really think that the voices are telling them that they're cheating on individuals, that they're lying to people. It's a very scary thing to witness from a treatment perspective.
And alcohol, you mentioned alcohol quite a few times. We tend to forget that alcohol plays a big role in all this.
Yeah, alcoholism, so again, the treatment of marijuana and the treatment of alcoholism and the drug in itself, I think are the worst drugs available. Alcoholism's, really, when you're dealing with alcoholism, you're dealing with alcoholic, you've got your dealer everywhere. Really, at every single corner.
And it's legal.
Yeah, and it's a legal thing. The big thing about alcohol is it has physically dependent properties. So we often guys got to come in here who are chronic alcoholics. They're suffering with what they call DTs, or dimension tremors, where pretty much the alcohol is starting to kind of affect them neurologically. They can barely walk, pretty much stiff-legged and that type of thing, which can, in some cases, over time, come right, but in most cases, not. But I've seen some awesome things happen here. So, alcoholism is a big thing. The treatment of alcoholism is completely different, in my opinion. Alcoholism is pretty much a substance where it's a very, very, very slow over the time deterioration over many, many, many years. The suicide ideation that comes with alcoholism is pretty much moderate to high risk. It's a serious thing.
And what about non-prescription pills? Do you get that? Because when one hears of the housewives or whoever, taking too many pills a day, and then suddenly they find out they're addicted to something you can buy over the counter.
Very much so. I think they've just currently, we'll have to go read it up, but I think they've actually currently just released the new laws relative to over-the-counter codeine, which is a big substance that's used and can be purchased off the shelf at the local pharmacists and chemists. Just to give you an idea, codeine is probably a very, very refined version of heroin, so it is an opiate. And again, used over an extended period of time, is physically addictive.
How many pills a day should be a warning sign?
Taking more than kind of would be prescribed on either of the directions on the actual bottle or from from a script from a doctor.
So anything over 12 pills a day should be a problem.
Well, the codeine also comes in a lot of your local cough mixtures that come out at the moment, Benylin and various other things that come like that too. I've had some cases with individuals in treatment that are using anything up to 2 litres a day.
The success rate of your centre?
Minnesota's standard of measuring success, they measure success over a period of a year. For me, success is not really based on clean time. For me, success is based on a kind of a quality of life. In our experience here, on the proviso that the individuals are finishing the program properly, effectively and correctly, sticking to a relapse prevention plan, as we call it, to the letter, and they've got a measurable life plan. I think our latest statistic showed at about 73% success, which is very, very, very high. I think the international success of recovery is sitting across the drugs around about 17.7%.
Mark, thank you very much. It's been a very, very interesting interview. Thank you. And best of luck.
Thank you, sir.
And congratulations with your 13 years.
Another 75 to go, Johan. Thanks.